Today with Mr. Bill Lamb of Saugatuck, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Mr. Lamb, can you start by giving us a little bit of background on yourself? For instance, where were you born?
Well, I was born in South Haven, Michigan, and lived in the area between Saugatuck and Ganges and Glen, because that's where my grandparents were from.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1937, we moved to Holland, Michigan. And then, of course, I went to grade school or high school there, and I turned 18 in October of 2042.
Mm-hmm.
And after graduation, I started college. But in those days, everything was up in the air. All your older friends were in service, and it was a war atmosphere. 24 hours a day, right around the clock. And from that point, I decided to enlist.
Okay. Now, before we get into that, let's back up a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your family. What did your father do for a living, for instance?
My father was a highway contractor, and consequently he could live any place because his work was all over the state. And he bid to the state highway department for the work that he got. And he had gone to the University of Michigan to college, and my mother had gone to Western Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And she became a teacher and was a teacher the first few years my parents were married.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have two brothers. Both of them were born in Jackson, Michigan, and they today one is alive and the other has passed away when he was only 57, but that was due to cancer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now, I guess if you're given the kind of job your father had now, was that a relatively good kind of job to have during the Depression? I mean, was he involved with government work for road building and stuff?
Yes, because during World War II, they were working on roads. As it happened, about all the contractors were working over at Willow Run at the Ford bomber plant over there, and they were building roads into Detroit to take the workers in and out, and everybody was in there in that type of work. As a matter of fact, I think it's 24th Street in the city of Holland, just below the hospital. There's a concrete road that runs west for about a mile, and that was because Bond Aluminum was there, and that was a wartime company, and they were building roads even to the local companies. But of course, the bulk of it was in the Detroit area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it still is.
Yes, still is.
Spoken like a proper West Michigan person, I guess. Okay, now, were you, let's see, before Pearl Harbor happened, were you paying any attention to what was going on in the world? Were you aware there was a war in Europe or there were things going on?
I was about a junior in high school and more concerned of whatever subjects I was taking at the time. And although I did have a history class, and I remember one history professor who eventually got into the Navy himself said, before this is done, all you young fellows are going to be in service too, and we were. We were the tail end, so to speak, of the group. People who were older, the Army and the Navies were filled with these people first before we got there. We were kind of the tail end Charlies, although a lot of us got into a lot of terrible places. We were still the minority of the population.
Now, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I do, oddly enough. We had a big front yard, and we used to have anybody over who wanted to play football in the yard. And I don't know why I didn't that day, but I was laying on the Davenport in the house, and we heard it on the radio.
And when that happened...
life changed.
Okay.
Life changed for everybody. And
in what ways did you see things changing just right around here in this the civilian community once that happened?
Well, basically, it took a while for the wheels to get going and for things to change. There were boards set up for draft. There were boards set up for gasoline rations.
Mm-hmm.
There were boards set up for that you could get stamps to buy meat. There were drives for aluminum, for you to save the tin foil out of your gum, and all of this. Anything to remind the public that they were in service and that everybody could help.
Mm-hmm.
And if you went to the meat market, you were limited to what you could get. You were limited on sugar. I know people going to colleges, going to Hope College, they had to take amount of sugar with them to replace whatever the college was using, and a lot of little things that what I would need would be somebody else to bounce these ideas off of, to remind me really of what happened, because there were so many things. There were tires, you couldn't get tires. The population's life changed a great deal. Not like the soldiers did, but nevertheless you were affected in many ways.
Okay. Now, at what point did you decide to enlist yourself?
About the time I flunked out of college, I guess it was hard to keep your mind on what was going on, because all your friends were in service. The war was paramount and everything. And as I said, I turned 18 in 1942, October, and I enlisted in December. And I was one of the last people to volunteer into the Air Corps, as it was called in those days.
And where had you been going to college?
I'd been at the University of Michigan, and I came back to Hope College. And I was only in Hope College maybe 2 months, 6 weeks, and I got my notice to report. By that, it meant that I met 25 of us, got on a train in Holland and proceeded to Chicago, where we slept on the floor of one of the hotels. Then we got on a train and headed for, we didn't know where. From that point on, your life is pretty much a blank, and all you know is what's going on right around you, because nobody tells you, and maybe the people even leading you don't know, other than the fact that it's a short view for them too. We ended up in a place called Fresno, California, which we lived in tar paper shacks, and I think these shacks had previously been housing the Japanese who our service had taken in and kind of put them in camps.
Yeah, there was a deportation center kind of in Fresno for sending people farther east into the middle of the country.
Bring them back east, get them away from the ocean.
And I have talked to people who at one point or another passed through there, so that's quite likely the case.
Well, that's where we took our indoctrination in the service, and they quarantined you in those days. Whenever you got into a camp like that, you couldn't get out or do anything for 6 or 8 weeks because of disease. And then they trained you in the basic things and started you to march and get you going in the right direction. Then from there, and again, don't ask me why, I still don't know to this day, they sent us from there, our group, to Grand Forks, North Dakota. And it was a nice little town, and we went to college there for 3 months. Why they didn't let us stay home, and they didn't. They put us there, and this was going on all over the United States, and it helped the colleges stay alive. We went to school there, and we did fly for, I forgot whether it was 5 or 10 hours. We'd go up for an hour or 40 minutes at a time. And we flew in a Cub.
Piper Cub?
Piper Cub. And we took turns of that and got the basics of flying. And then from there, they shipped us back out to California, to Santa Ana, California, which was a really nothing more than an Air Corps basic training school, where they begin to train you a little bit different. By that I mean you got classes in meteorology, you got classes in airplane identification. They put you, believe me, in 100% great physical condition.
Mm-hmm.
And they just worked you day after day to get you to in physical condition, so you were a good specimen.
Now, how well were you holding up through all of this, between the school courses and the physical training and the discipline and so forth? How did you respond to that?
Well, frankly, I think I was a little homesick at the time. But otherwise, as far as doing things, it was great. And then also at that same time, we had to take Morse code. Why, I don't know. Everybody took Morse code, and I don't think there was 1/10 of 1% of the population that ever used it in the Air Force or in Air Force.
Yeah, that's what the radio men say too.
Yeah, but it was a great education. But nevertheless, I missed passing the code by one word, and I thought I was going to get washed out, but it didn't. They said, oh, no, not for that. You stick around, and you have to wait and go with the next class. Well, that was kind of devastating because all of my friends, for almost a half a year, are losing all of them because they were moving on to flight school. But the one benefit of that was that I had run a number of races, and that was kind of a feather in my lieutenant's cap because his squadron was doing better than the other squadrons. And so he said to me one time, he says, you know, there's no sense for you sticking around here for the weekend. You've been through all of this. He said, I have a place where you can go for the weekend, and these people will come and get you, and they'll come and get you Friday night and bring you back Sunday night. And I ended up meeting the nicest couple. They're both gone now, and they had 2 daughters. The older daughter had married a previous cadet and moved on, but he was a home contractor, and it was a beautiful house in the hills up in Whittier, California, where Nixon was originally from.
Right.
And but we went there, I think, 3 weekends. We got to go there, including a Christmas weekend. And they were such great people. We kept in contact with them through the whole war, and until they died. We used to exchange letters, and they came through one time to see their daughter and son-in-law, who he was in service in that time after the war, and he was in Battle Creek. And they came here, and then twice we were out in California, and we stopped down there to see this couple, which was great.
Okay, so you had Christmas there. That's probably Christmas of '43.
Right.
At that point.
Yep.
All right.
Very nice.
Okay. And so then, when did you get to move on from there?
Well, from there, must have been January, we went to King City, which was north of there. And that was a, not an Air Corps base, but it was a civilian base. But I think many of the bases at that time were civilian bases because the Air Corps didn't have enough people. They
So
were
a civilian airfield?
They were in throes of expanding a civilian field and civilian teachers. And there I flew a plane called Orion, PT-22, and it was an open airplane, and that was quite an experience. Now, you know, not a very big motor. I think 60 or 80 horsepower. But I soloed with that and flew there and got my time in there. And there again, a half a day you'd go to different classes such as meteorology, navigation, cross country, math, and that type of thing. And then in the afternoon, or vice versa, you'd fly. You'd go out the flight line. You wouldn't fly all afternoon, but you'd rotate with your friends. And I remember, and here you had civilian pilots, and I forgot to tighten my seatbelt too tight that one day for some reason, and that was the day he decided to fly upside down.
Oh.
And he turned it over, and I was supposed to, you know, keep my feet on the pedals too. I couldn't reach the pedals because I fell away. fortunately, but we wore parachutes when we had that plane and the next plane, and we were there for 2 or 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
going through this process, and again, physical condition all the time too, intermingled with your studies. So, and you were never out nights. You weren't out weekends.
Mm-hmm.
We were lower than a PFC in the Army. I mean, you were ridden all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much of that was psychological to see if they could break you.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes wonder because they did give us, back at Santa Ana, they did give us psychological exams. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess we were one of the first groups of people who had gone through all kinds of interviews and to come up with things and to determine if they could predetermine what
Mm-hmm.
people could or couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
From King City, which was a nice place in the valley, we flew up and down the valley there in California. We went to Marana, Arizona, which was about 30 miles north of Tucson, right out in the brush, the
Mm-hmm.
cactus and the brush. And we had blacktop runways and big blacktop squares out in the desert where we'd go out and practice landings.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's where you sold it too. And again, the same procedure all around. Only here we had lieutenants mostly who were pilots themselves, and some of them had been overseas, put in their time, and
Mm-hmm.
came back, and they were tough and rough.
Mm-hmm.
And again, all the schools going all the time, morning or afternoon you'd go to school, and then the other part of the day you'd go out and fly BT-6.
Mm-hmm. Now, was that still a single engine plane?
That was a single engine plane, but it had a cover over the cockpits,
Mm-hmm.
and it had an engine that, wow, we jumped from a 65 horsepower to, I think maybe that was 650
Mm-hmm.
horsepower. It was big, and it was really a great plane. And in retrospect, I'm sorry that I didn't have more faith in these planes. I always
Mm-hmm.
thought they were going to fall apart or have a problem, but I never heard of one doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Always going through all of these processes of schools, somebody was getting killed. They'd
Mm-hmm.
do the wrong thing. I remember this one pilot. We had different instructors. We didn't have the same one every time. And this one instructor took me. He said, "Have you ever been in a I think he said an inverted spin?" Well, I had never been in one. I'd never even heard of one. He says, "Well, I'll show you how it is." So I think we were up maybe 5,000 or 10,000 feet. And a spin, you put the nose over and kick the rudder,
Mm-hmm.
and you go down like this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to get out of that, you push the stick forward and kick the other rudder, and you come out fine. Well, he did that, but he did it tight.
Mm-hmm.
So then we reversed the spin we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the pressure against my body, against the plane, I couldn't have got out of that plane if he hadn't brought it out of that spin, but he did. And fortunately, I never got into that kind of a
Mm-hmm.
problem. Again, all the schooling there in Tucson, and it was great weather.
From the sound of it, you haven't had a whole lot of opportunities to sort of get off base and get into trouble.
No, very, very little. And when you did get off, there were 10,000 guys at the same place.
Mm-hmm.
My mother did come out and see me in Arizona. And I think back on it, it was really something for her to do that, because
Mm-hmm.
just prior to coming, she was cooking something and she burned her arm. But even so, she wrapped that up and came out by train and saw me in Tucson, and she stayed at the hotel there. And then from there, Tucson, of course, one reason for holding these places, these flying places where they were, was because the weather was
Right.
so good.
Right.
So much of the time, you didn't lose time according
Mm-hmm.
to weather. But we moved over to Fort Sumter, New Mexico, to another place that had been built
Mm-hmm.
and Elsie and I, my wife and I, back to see that years later. This was out in the desert again, and nothing there but desert, and there was still a concrete runway. And they put us in what we called twin-breasted Cubs. I think they had probably 600 horsepower in 2 motors, and I think it was built by Beech Aircraft. But this is where we learned to fly multi-engine planes. And then we did everything there and flew all over. We didn't do aerobatics like we did in the first 2 planes. This was straight flying, and we flew all over the state. I had an experience one night that we had a night cross country. We had to fly to 2 corners of the state and then back. It was a beautiful night. It was great flying, and I don't know why, but on the way back, it looked to me like we were getting awful low on gasoline, and I was very apprehensive about running out of gas because you can't see the ground. It's darker than Dickens in the desert. So we came in, got in the flight pattern, and got in line and came in, and we're just getting ready to land, and we're leveling out in front of these floodlights right at the end of the runway, and the person down there yells, says, "Plane landing, go around, plane landing, go around." So I shoved the throttles forward, we went around. We hadn't put our wheels down. I had my mind so concentrated on that gas tank. But the co-pilot didn't think of it either. Well, then when we made it around, fortunately, and landed, and everything was fine. But they wanted to know who was landing that plane that didn't have its wheels down. And I thought, man, this is the end of the line. But I went in and saw the captain and told him my plight. It didn't make much difference. It was a poor excuse. And he chewed me out, and I forgot. He slapped my wrist some way. I don't know if it was writing on the blackboard or what, but gradually I got through, and I was afraid I'd be washed out.
Well, you suppose that's the way a lot of training accidents happen? You should just forget something?
Yeah, there were always accidents. I'll tell you about one later on here. Lots of times you didn't, unless the other cadet was in your barracks or your group, you didn't know it. All you ever heard, you just heard about it. Very seldom did you see one yourself. And that's the closest I came to an accident, was that stupid trick. And I never did forget again to put my wheels down in the next 2 years of flying. But anyway, after that, we graduated, got our wings, and many of us got to be flight officer, and the rest of us were lieutenants. Well, we felt bad. We were never told why, because we had gone through all the classes, gone through all the flying, everything was that way. And about 5 years ago, I was reading a book called Washed Out, and that written by a general who had been in service like I had and stayed in. He'd stayed in, and he wrote this book. And he said he felt badly for us. He was a lieutenant, but it was because we weren't 21 years old. We'd done everything as everybody else had done. But in some respects, being a flight officer didn't carry the same connotation as a lieutenant. Lots of times lieutenants were looked down upon, especially by the enlisted man. We never had that problem. We were something like a warrant officer. There was a warrant officer.
They were
really comparable.
Sort of lowest level that still counts as an officer.
That's right. Yeah. You got the benefits of an officer, but you didn't get the whole responsibility, I guess. But anyway, I think I was 20, and that didn't count. But I didn't know that until recently. Well, from there we got 2 weeks vacation. Went home, and a vacation sounds great, and it was nice to get a break from service, but you didn't know anybody. Everybody was gone.
Mm-hmm.
The only people who were left were somebody who happened to be 4F and couldn't help it, and they felt badly because they couldn't get in. I had one friend who had had a childhood problem, and he couldn't get in, so he felt badly. But there were very a few things to do other than see an old girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
and that was about it. And so, but from there, my father had bought an extra car, and he was gracious enough to loan me that car while I was taking my advanced training. So I picked up a couple of the fellas, and we went out to Lincoln, Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And I got out to Lincoln, Nebraska, and went in to report, and they said, we're transferring this, we're closing this field down, and everybody here is going to go to Lawrenceville, Illinois. Lawrenceville, Illinois is way down on the Indiana border,
Mm-hmm.
about where Kentucky and Indiana, they all hit. So I said, well, how am I going to get there? I don't have enough gas. And he says, go over to that table, and that sergeant over there will give you gas to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave me a whole bunch of C stamps to get there, and I turned around to leave, and then the fellas I brought out from Chicago, they couldn't go with me. They had to fly back.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to fly them down. Some fella came up to me and he said, hey, would you take my wife with you to Lawrenceville, Indiana? And I said, well, you don't know me from Adam. I said,
Mm-hmm.
what are you doing? He says, well, I want to get her there, and I know her. I'm not going to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay. So I forgot her name, but we drove across, and in those days, there weren't motels. There were these little houses at each
Mm-hmm.
place. Well, we only had to stop once or twice at night, and the people didn't know whether we were mad at each other or what, because
Mm-hmm.
we'd get two houses. Oh, we got down to Lawrenceville, Indiana, and that is really right. And this was the fall, September, October, November, I think, of 44.
By then, yeah.
44, and they didn't have a lot of the navigational aids in those days, neither on the planes or at the airfields. And they didn't know what the weather was going to be. And
Mm-hmm.
we were sent out after we'd learned to fly these planes, the C-47s, DC-3s, the
Mm-hmm.
Goonie Bird.
Right.
It's got more names than Carter's got liver
Mm-hmm.
pills. And we went out on a night flight, again, across country.
Mm-hmm.
It all went well, except on the last leg of our deal, it started to freezing rain.
Oh.
And freezing rain is a terrible thing for an airplane, because it'll weigh it down, and you can't work your flaps, you can't work your aliens, and you'll just go in if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
You can turn your boots on, which is a rubber deal on the leading edge of your wings, but if you're not careful, the ice will freeze right over those, and they'll do you no good, which is what was happening to us. And I remember we slid the side window open on the plane, and we found a screwdriver in the cockpit, and we reached out around in front of the pilot and scraped off some of the ice so we could see the land, and we landed fine.
Mm-hmm.
But this lady I told you about that I brought out from Nebraska, her husband was killed that night.
Mm-hmm.
His plane crashed, and it's really something to watch even today. And that's why they coat all airliners. They spray them before they take off. That's to get rid of the ice. Well, we stayed there. I guess we got out about December, and then we had our time in, and we got ready to go overseas, and we were shipped out to Bearfield, Indiana, and we picked up different things that we needed for foreign occupation and the like, and we took a train in from there to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and that was a big embarkation center, and there we boarded a British ship. I think it was called the Aquitania. The Lusitania was sunk in World War I by the Germans. The Mauritania was the other ship, and I don't know whatever happened to it, but we sailed over alone, and it's amazing how full or how many people they can get in a stateroom. I mean, I want to say there were 12 of us. Now that may sound crazy. We each had a bed, but you had to take turns getting into that room and getting into your bed. And we had an uneventful trip. I think we had 2 meals a day, and we ended up in Firth of Clyde, England. And then from there we took a train down to I forget the name of a little place west of London, but it was an embarkation center. Again, all peoples went in there.
Right.
I think there were probably 7 or 8 of us pilots that went in there together. We were replacements by this time. The war is a long the way, but the Battle of Bulge is going on, but we didn't know about it. You know, the Battle of Bulge was over. About this time, Eisenhower's and his general staff are trying to figure out what they're going to do next, and I think they had decided that they were going to have another glider invasion with about 4 different places, 4 different choices, but they didn't have enough people to do this, and they'd found out in previous invasions and glider escapades that one glider pilot wasn't enough, because if he was hit, wounded, or killed, that glider was lost with everything was in it. So they decided to put 2 people in a glider this next invasions. But they didn't have enough glider pilots, so then they had to choose power pilots, which the power pilots weren't aware of at that time. And none of us, maybe some have it. I certainly didn't have any practice or knowledge of this kind of thing. And we got into, we were taken from England to Chartres, France. And there were 5 or 6 of us, and we were told to wait till a plane came in to get us. Well, a plane came in from the 442nd Troop Carrier Group, and the pilot said that he wanted Lamb and Lang, and then that was 2 of us. So everything went together by your name, really, your friends. We went to the 2 of us went to Saint Andre, France, which was southwest of Paris, maybe 60 miles. It was a tent city. It was a temporary place, something the engineers had probably put up for everybody, and the outfit had moved in there maybe a month before we got there, and they had been through all the events up to that time. They even flew the C-47s overseas, coming by way of Brazil and the Azores and Africa and Spain, and they were involved in the previous glider invasions. And we wanted to fly, of course. That was one thing we wanted to do, was never got enough flight time. Of course, there was nothing else to do. And so we first thing he did with us was put us in link trainers to see what we could do or couldn't do. And after a little practice of that, then they started flying us around, and we flew back to England a number of times to pick up things they needed and brought them to France. Well, then along came one of the fellows one day and said he'd just volunteered for going into glider. And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, the invasion's coming. They're going into Germany." And he said, I just got here before you did, and I don't want to be left out of this deal." And I said, "Well, neither do I." And I had forgot what I promised my father. My father, who had been in World War I, the only thing he said to me when I left for service was, "Don't ever volunteer for anything." So what happens the first time I get a chance to volunteer, I really forgot. I didn't really go against his wishes. I just accidentally forgot. And I volunteered, went into the major and volunteered. And I might have got put in the glider anyway, I don't know. And the fellow that I came over with, he got to be a co-pilot. And we flew in, it was a huge undertaking. The British were flying all of their gliders and their glider pilots, and they were coming from England. Our group was the furthest away from where we were going to cross the Rhine of anybody. And the 2 or 3 days before, the general in charge at the river was British General Montgomery, and their whole outfit had set up these smoke machines. And they ran smoke machines for 2 or 3 days across the Rhine. Well, the Germans knew we were coming. They had all their anti-aircraft batteries in there, and they were just kind of waiting for us. Well, this smoke was supposed to stay down low. We were supposed to come in at 500 feet. Well, here we are 3.5 hours away from that site where we're going to cross. We start out, we're kind of the tail end group. The first people that went in, they jumped paratroopers. And they were supposed to get in and knock the glider, or knock the anti-aircraft people out.
Right.
Well, they did some and they didn't some, as they say, as these operations always go. They're never perfect. We came along, as I say, 3.5 hours later, and about a half hour before we get to the Rhine, I put on my flak suit, and Judd, who I had not met before, put on it. He said, "You fly it." Well, I put on a flag suit. I'd never flown a glider before. The only thing I can think of is it was just like trying to handle a bucking bronco, because it was so rough that day. Here you are in a slipstream of 100 miles of airplanes and gliders, and it was a busy day weather-wise. It was a beautiful day, but there was so much wind, and we were just bouncing. So, as a matter of fact, I got sick and opened up the little window and threw up. And I don't know what we were taking a Jeep with all the radio equipment and a colonel and a sergeant. We were taking it together. And we got the Rhine, and Judd got on his flak suit. We got across, and show you how stupid I am and why this was really kind of lousy using pilots. No experience. Fortunately, I was kind of raised on a farm and knew how to handle a rifle and do those kinds of things. We get across the Rhine, and the first thing I see is some black stuff, and I said to Judd, "What's that?" You know, how stupid could I be? It was flak. And here we are at 1,200 feet. We're supposed to be at 500 feet. The planes in front of us had kept going up and up to be able to see, so they wouldn't run into their planes on either side of them, or
So
the
smoke
gliders.
was going too high?
Smoke was going too high. It was horrible. And we got up there, and I was watching my wristwatch because we were to cut loose 3 minutes after we crossed the Rhine. The glider cuts loose from the airplane. The airplane doesn't cut you loose.
Right.
Another stupid thing that happened, one of the things, and I remember how I happen to know, is I don't know, but the pilots were to hold on to these 250-some foot nylon ropes and take them back to the other side of the Rhine and drop them in a certain area so they could save them. Well, when you fly a glider and you're going to come in to land a glider, you make 3 left turns. The pilot's on the left side. He makes a left turn. He's brought in perpendicular to wherever he's going to go. He makes a left turn. He gets to see everything where he might land. Well, we start to make the left turn, and of course we're heavy, and we start to drop. And the first thing we both see right in front of us is a C-47 flying up out of that fog. He'd been down low, and he had this tail rope on him. That rope had touched us, it would have just ripped the wing off, ripped us apart. And Judd was quick enough. I probably had pulled back on the stick and gone over it, but he didn't. He did the wise thing. He dove. and he dove to get under that, which we did. And I want to say, I think that the glider was redlined at 150 miles an hour. You were not supposed to go that fast. We were doing 180 miles an hour, and we had to pull out of that zone. And of course we're really sailing, and we finally get down low enough and get under the cloud, the smoke that we can see, and you know there's everything's going by you fast, and there's trees and there's other gliders. He made a left turn, and then he made another left turn, and he came. It was a beautiful landing. He came in, made the nicest landing, and the co-pilot then is holding on to a deal above your head, where if you want to let that nose go, you can let that nose flip right up in the air in case you're going to hit a wall or a tree. You're not going to have this Jeep come behind you and smash it, because it'll tear loose. It wouldn't hold. And so we got down and we lifted the glider. We got the sergeant, I got the colonel and the sergeant out. Bingo, they were gone. They weren't going to take us anyplace, and never did see him again. Never heard about him again.
So you're basically sitting in the middle of a field with
When it happens, we're close to the side of a barn. And one of the interesting things on a battlefield, you see it on television or something, and normally it's loud and noisy. This was the most quiet, eerie day. All I could hear was a ping once in a while. And I thought there were some Germans in the barn next to us there, but we weren't. We were supposed to get to a certain place and meet with others to help guard a road and protect the area behind us from the Germans. But fortunately, I never saw a German other than a dead one. And when I got up to the spot where we were going to dig in for the night, there were maybe 50 or 100 of us had gathered together in this one area.
Now, did you know where you were when you landed?
Well, I don't think I did, but I'll show you a map over there.
I mean, in terms of where you had to go, I mean...
Well, we must have, because we got there shortly. Maybe it was Judd doing it and not me, or maybe it was a collective thing. I don't remember really back that far. But we did find a place, although I don't remember there being any of our outfit there. There were 7 of us who went in as co-pilots. And all of us were power pilots. 2 of those fellows were wounded out of 7. It was a heavily damaged group of people by percentages. And some of the power pilot or some of the co-pilots were killed. First place, these gliders are made out of little pipe and tar paper, well, not tar paper, canvas, and a plywood floor. It's a day gone by, like the cavalry. But anyway, we got up to this place to dig in for the night, and I remember a paratrooper come up to me, and he was younger than I was, and he was alone. He was, you don't know where you are, he didn't know where he was. And he said, I just shot, there was a Volkswagen going around down the road with 2 Germans in it. He says, I just shot one, and one of them keeled over. And he was all braggadocious about this. And I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, why did you do that? I mean, that's how indoctrinated I was for that type of a problem. And all of us were that way, all power pilots. We hadn't had the training in the 6 months to a year that they drill into you to hate your enemy. We had a job to do, and we did it. And there's interesting things that go on that makes you wonder. But for today, they got helicopters, and they can put you down right where they want to put you down, or they can repel you down, but not us. And then from there, we stayed there all night, And one German plane came over low one night. I don't know in the world he could do that. He was, and I didn't hear much. It was quiet, a little shooting, but not too much. And then the next day, we walked out. That same day, I wish Bill Mould had been there. You know, the artist.
Mm-hmm.
I saw GI taking a grandma and a grandpa and maybe a 4-year-old blonde-haired girl walking down this country road to take them to the compound.
Mm-hmm.
And what a drawing that would have been. That's been etched in my mind ever since. Is here this GI is taking these people. None of the three of them could beat their way out of a paper sack.
Right.
Well, after we spent the night there, we were to collect Germans, and I mean there were more Germans. If they wanted to have attacked us, they could have. There's nothing we could have done. There were hundreds of them. Probably ended up thousands of them that we took back to the Rhine, because theoretically we were in maybe 3 miles beyond the Rhine, 4 miles, and then we went back to Rhine, and then
were there ground units that had come out to join you by then?
Yeah, by then they've come out and gone through us and moving beyond us to the east, and the British Army basically.
So you were looking for stragglers or just?
You mean with the Germans?
Yeah.
Well, these were Germans that the paratroopers had captured, or other glider pilots had captured, or people who'd given up.
Yeah.
And they had no guns or anything. They just a beaten army, and we took them to the Rhine, and there were people to take care of them. And,
right. What did these soldiers look like, and how old were they? What condition were they in?
Oh, I would say all ages, kids to middle-aged to older people. Yeah, it was a tail end of the war, and they acted like it was the tail end of the war. They were beat. They'd been through enough and seen enough, and they really had a rough time, rightly so. But they'd been through the works. Then we got the other side of the Rhine that night, and I remember going into some place where the British were running a camp kind of a place, and they had put big tarps up that you could sleep under, and I remember getting a cup of British tea, and I don't like tea, but that was the greatest tea I ever had. Hot tea, sweet, you know. I laid down, and the British were getting rid of their shells, and they were shooting their big guns off all night long, and that never mind, it slept right through it. And then the next day, our outfit flew a plane in and picked us all up. And then from then on, we flew gas to Patton. We'd fly 675 gallons in our plane and 135 jerry cans, 135 5-gallon jerry cans full of gas. And we'd put those in our own plane. We'd unload them from our own plane. And we would land in German airfields, previous German airfields. Right. And we landed all over. We went all over Europe, following Patton, and taking gas to keep his tanks, or help keep his tanks running. Right. And then we would bring out wounded, or we'd bring out displaced personnel, or people, GIs that had come out of POW camps, and all kinds of people. Flew them back to France, flew them to Belgium or Brussels or wherever they had put them in groups to go back to.
Are there particular individuals or types of people that kind of stick in your mind, or ones who made an impression on you as you were loading them onto your plane?
Yes, a few, because we weren't very long. You know, you load them up, you take off, and you were busy. There was a German professor. I think he was from. I know he was from the Netherlands. I was trying to think of which city, but he had a Star David, and he gave me that Star David that he was required to wear by the Germans, And I gave that to Seymour and Stu Padnos,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand that that Star of David now is in the temple in Grand Rapids,
It could well be.
and in their memorabilia.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then there was a GI who'd been a POW for 18 months. He told me he had a beautiful mustache,
Mm-hmm.
but he never gave me his address. I took a picture of it, and but maybe he didn't shave it off and took it home and showed it.
Mm-hmm.
But no, you didn't have enough time. And then I remember another group of people. I really didn't know what was going on again. You don't.
Mm-hmm.
But since the war, I've read enough to know. We took Russians who had been fought for the Germans, maybe, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and we took them back. But they didn't want to go.
No.
They didn't want to go because they were all going to be shot.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't run away. Of course, I don't know where they would run to. But I remember. I remember we picked them up someplace and took them further
Mm-hmm.
towards Russia. But I was fortunate. I didn't have any accidents or got to fly all over Europe. I got into all the cities, and then after the war, the fellows who'd come over with the outfit in the beginning, they got to go home to have a vacation and go to Japan,
Right.
which they were lucky they didn't have to do. And we went on to Munich, and we were there from fall of '45 till May of '46, and then we set up an airline and flew all over it, and that wasn't much fun because then you couldn't fly like you wanted to fly. Maybe we flew a little reckless when we were alone, but we were safe enough too.
So were you flying mostly cargo or passengers?
Passengers. Yeah, mostly passengers, officers from one destination to another, or you fly back to England and pick up something. And
Now, once you kind of actually based in one place for a while, did you get to see much of the local area or the population or anything like that?
well, you see, at that time, they still talked about fraternization. You weren't supposed to fraternize with the enemy, which they still were. And I didn't know German, so how am I going to talk to them? We went to a little town just east of Munich called Haar, Haar, and they put us up in we had a compound with a wall even around it, but it was a hospital. So we had this hospital which had, had a regular kitchen for cooking and rooms, and there was two of us to a room, and we played ping pong, and I remember getting permission to go out and go hunting in the area, hunting deer, and we had a officer's a place in another building. I don't know why it was separate. Maybe we just needed more room. And then the Christmas of '45, we flew down. Our CO got us. The whole group got off. We went to Garmisch, which was the 1936 ski Olympics, and we went down there. And I often wondered what the Germans thought. We were all in church on Christmas Eve, And but I do remember one time going into Munich, and I guess we heard music coming from this hotel, and they got beautiful string music, And we went in to hear it, and man, there were Germans in there, the older generation, and of course they didn't know whether we had wings on, so they, I'm sure they assumed that we were the ones who bombed them, but we didn't do any bombing, but they really stared us down. They really stared us down. But no, we didn't fraternize at all, or I didn't.
Okay. Are there other memories of that sort of post-war period, things that kind of stand out in your mind or that you tend to remember as a particular place you went or something you saw or something like that?
Well, I enjoyed all of Europe. I mean, well, I got into Berlin. As I say, I got into every place there was. I got into Berlin only once, but you know what? There was nothing there. We just bombed so badly. Yeah, I had a couple of. I had an interesting experience one time, and I've always you taught me that you shouldn't judge people. I had to fly into Vienna from Munich, and I had to be tested or be checked by an officer. And so there was the pilot, or co-pilot, myself as a pilot, and this officer checking me to give me approval for what, I don't know. I've been flying so much. And but we flew into Vienna, and we stayed the night. I don't know if we did anything else or not. Well, I never was much for one of these drinking. I didn't drink, although I associated with so many guys that did and put them to bed, But anyway, these guys wanted to go out and drink that night in Vienna. And I said, hey, no way, I don't want to go do that. So I don't know what I did. Maybe walked the streets and then went to the hotel and went to bed. Well, we had a room together, or 2 rooms together. And so I went in, took one of the beds, where there were 2 in a room, 2 beds in a room, the front room, I guess it was, and went to sleep. And the next thing I know, I hear these guys coming in. And they both have women with them. So the women spend the night with these 2 fellas. We wake up in the morning to shave and get ready and leave. Neither one of those fellas had a shaving kit, had a wallet. Those 2 gals had taken everything they could take and walked out. They never touched one item of mine. Which always surprised me, because they could have just as well taken my wallet too. I was sound asleep. It taught me that don't judge people. And as I said, for the story, for this report, when the war ended in May, I was stationed in Munich, Germany. And in World War I, my father was close to Munich in World War I when it ended. And I can't imagine how many father-son outfits happened like that.
Not too many, just given that the Americans had a much more limited involvement in the First War. You didn't have the same kind of extended occupation that you had after it. Now, when you finally got discharged, what did you do when you got back?
When I got discharged, I came in from Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, and or I came home on a Liberty ship, which is a longer trip and more junky, but it was all right. I came into Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, came back to Camp Kilmore, then Camp McCoy, and came home by train. And my father had bought me a set of golf clubs. So I spent that whole summer playing golf. And almost every day.
Did you go back to college eventually?
Then I went back to college at Hope College in the fall, And a couple of years later, I met a young lady, and we got married. We've been married 60 years.
And what line of work did you go into?
I went in work with my father in highway construction, and my 2 brothers came in, and we worked that until 83. We built that in Grand Rapids, and 83 when my brother died, and then we kind of had to divide things up to make it easier. One other interesting thing, I don't know, do you remember a movie star by the name of Jackie Coogan?
Yes.
Well, I forgot to tell you, when we were training down in Lawrenceville, Illinois, in gliders, we had not seen a glider before. We didn't know we were going to pull gliders or anything like that. One day we heard about it. We went out to the flight line, and these gliders are being towed around the field, and they had a snatch set up, which means they put up 2 poles and put this line across between the 2 poles, and then the C-47 comes in real low and picks it up with a tail hook. And this fella is going to take off, and the glider's empty except for the pilot and the co-pilot. and it's Jackie Coogan.
Mm-hmm.
He's the pilot. He's back from the China, Burma, India
Mhm.
area. He spent some time in Burma. And we said, can we ride with you? And he said, sure, get in. So we got in like Stoops, stood up, held onto the pipes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how smooth that went off, because that line is got some elasticity in it, and it gives.
Mm-hmm.
And it was no big jerk. We went around and landed, and everything was fine. But gliders, I wouldn't recommend to anybody. As I said, it's like the cavalry.
Mm-hmm.
That they've seen their time.
To look back on the whole thing now, how do you think your time in the service wound up affecting you, or the way you looked at things, or?
Oh, I think the service was very effective. In lots of ways, lots of ways. I think my dad too told me. He says, "You wouldn't take $1 million for it when you get back, and you wouldn't do it again for $1 million." I guess that's right. Because so much looking back is great,
Mm-hmm.
but you know it's a pain in the bucket. Lots of times it's slow. Mistakes are made. You get people who above you who are really don't have the capacity for their jobs, and but nevertheless, it's a great experience. It teaches you about those people as well as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see so much of the country.
Yep. Yeah. Well, looks like our tape is about out. It looks like we've just about wrapped up here. So
Well,
thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.
All right. You may have gotten more.